27 years ago, an entire fifth-grade class vanished during a school trip. No bodies, no evidence. Just a bus that never came back. But today, one grieving mother stares at a photo she's seen 100 times, and suddenly she sees it. A detail so small, and yet so impossible to ignore. And once she does, the whole case begins to unravel. On the morning of September 28, 2023, Laura Calloway woke to silence. The sky outside was a canvas of gray, the kind that soaked into your skin even before the rain fell. Today marked exactly 27 years since her daughter Rory had disappeared. There were no anniversaries anymore. No balloons, no cakes. Only a photo. One photo, Rory in her school umlau. Oh, Rory. Downstairs, the kettle hissed. She made herself tea but barely touched it. A message, thinking of you too. Helen Carter had also lost a daughter that day. Sally. There, Laura packed a small jar of lavender cookies and a few tea packets into her tote. She didn't like. Helen's home was only 3 blocks away. Same house, same pale blue door. But Helen greeted her with, "How are you, Helle?" Still breathing. Laura said. They had this ritual every year. Tea, memories, quiet sobs. But tea, I went to the station last spring, she said. They let me keep copies of the old evidence files. Photos, mostly. You want to see them? Laura hesitated, then nodded. Helen brought out a thick envelope and spread its contents on the coffee table. Dozens of images. Classrooms, school, events, field trips, sign-in sheets, candid photos of children laughing, teachers smiling. Then Laura saw something that made her breath hitch. It was a photo she'd never seen before. 15 children lined up in front of a school bus. Her daughter Rory was right there. But what chilled her, what made the room suddenly feel too small, was the figure standing at the edge of the frame. "Why is Principal Lillian Brooks in this picture?" Laura asked. Helen blinked. "Wasn't it just Mr. Gregory and a support staff who went on the trip?" "That's what I was told. That's what all the parents were told." Helen shrugged, uneasy. "There were rumors that the principal showed up at the last minute, but I never thought much of it." Laura's eyes narrowed. "No, this doesn't feel right." Helen reached for her hand. "Don't do this to yourself again. We've chased shadows before." "I know," Laura said, "but something about this, it's wrong." Later that day, Laura rode the bus into town to visit Rory's grave just like she did every year. But the photo burned in her hand like a brand. And when the bus slowed near an old, familiar street, Laura made a sudden decision. She got off early. She was standing outside Principal Lillian Brooks's house before she realized what she was doing. The yard was still immaculate. Hedges clipped, porch swept, and a car in the driveway. She hesitated, then knocked. Nothing. She turned to leave, then saw 2 women approaching the house. One older, one young. The older woman froze when she saw Laura. Recognition spread across her face like spilled ink. "Mrs. Calloway," she said cautiously. "Yes," Laura replied. "I have a question about the day my daughter vanished." The principal hesitated, then invited her inside briefly. "I have a guest," she added quickly. The younger woman slipped into a back room, watching silently from the shadows. Inside, Laura pulled out the photo. "This picture," she said. "Was it taken at the school or on the trip?" Principal Brooks looked. "That was at the park," she said, then corrected herself. No. Sorry. The parking lot. At the school. Before they left." Laura narrowed her eyes. "Were you on that trip?" "No, I had a meeting. I switched places with an admin." "But you're in the photo." "It was before the bus left. I didn't go." Laura didn't push harder. But she left with more questions than she came with. And the face of that young woman, quiet, pale, hovering in the hallway, stuck in her memory. She continued on to the cemetery, flowers in hand. Rory's grave was just a plaque. No body, no closure, just a symbol of absence. Laura knelt, whispered her daughter's name, then cried as she had for 27 years. And that's when she saw her again. The young woman from the house, standing not far from Rory's grave, clutching a photograph. Tears on her cheeks, Laura stood and approached. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I think I saw you earlier today." The young woman froze. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. Laura shook her head. "Neither do I. But you're standing over one of the missing children's graves." Silence. Were you in that class?" A long pause, then a nod. "I'm Audrey Whitman," she said. "I was one of the missing. I'm alive." Laura's heart stopped. She reached for her phone with shaking fingers. Please, she said, you have to tell the police. They'll hate me, Audrey whispered. I've been hiding all this time. Why? Because Principal Brooks helped me. She paid for my life, my rent. In exchange, I kept quiet. Laura felt like the air had been punched from her lungs. She knew. Yes, she always knew. But Rory, Laura whispered, do you know what happened to my daughter? Audrey's eyes filled with tears. She didn't make it, she said. They gave her too much. It was the first day. She didn't even get off the bus. Laura crumbled. She sank to her knees, sobbing as Audrey stood frozen above her. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was the truth. Audrey finally agreed to go to the police. At the station, she told everything. The traffickers, the faked accident, the buried evidence, and how Principal Brooks had helped cover it up because she was scared, because she was in debt, because she thought she could erase her part. But the children had paid the price. Rory, Sally, 13 others, all gone, except Audrey. By the time Lillian Brooks was arrested that night, Laura, Helen, and the other parents were already gathering again, this time not in grief, but in fury. A case reopened, a truth unearthed, and a name, Rory Calloway, finally given peace. News of Audrey's testimony spread fast. Within 24 hours, her name was trending across every major outlet. Not just because she was a survivor, but because she was the key to one of the most horrifying cold cases in American history. The police confirmed her identity through DNA and school records. Then they confirmed something even more haunting. The class was never meant to return. 27 years ago, the field trip had been hijacked before it even began. The driver silenced, the teacher framed, and the principal paid to look the other way, then paid to keep it that way forever. Audrey had spent years buried in different names in therapy wards and safe houses, but none of it had been enough to erase what happened. And now that the truth was out, she felt both terrified and free. Laura stood by her through the entire process, from the interviews to the forensic reviews, to the day Audrey finally agreed to stand in front of the other victims' families. They gathered in a community center gymnasium, dozens of parents, siblings, even grandparents who had never found peace. Audrey stepped forward, and for the first time she told them everything. She told them about the heat, about the buses that never made it to the park, about the border trucks and the cages. She told them how they were separated by gender, how some of the kids were taken right away, how she never saw Rory or Sally again after the first 48 hours. Some people sobbed, some walked out, some simply sat motionless like ghosts. When it was over, she didn't wait for applause. There was none, just silence. But when Laura stood and walked to her, hugged her tightly, others followed, one by one. Helen, Matthew, even Officer Jensen. It didn't bring their children back, but it brought something else. Light. Weeks later, a memorial was held not at a graveyard, but at the school, the place where the story began. A new plaque had been installed beneath the flagpole, in memory of the 15. They were taken, but never forgotten, and they will never be erased. Laura read the names aloud, one by one. Rory Calloway, Sally Carter, Audrey Whitman, and 12 others who had once filled a classroom with laughter and noise. The school had changed. New paint, new staff, but the pain lingered like a shadow beneath the bricks. After the ceremony, Audrey stood beside the old bus loop, the place the last known photo had been taken. She held the image in her hands, now brittle at the edges but sharp in memory. I remember this day, she whispered. Laura joined her. You looked so happy, she said. Audrey nodded. I was. That was the last moment I was ever just a kid. They stood in silence. Then Audrey asked, what happens now? Laura looked at her. You live, loudly, kindly, bravely, for every one of them. Audrey wiped her cheek and smiled through her tears. I think I can do that. In the months that followed, a nonprofit was founded in their names, the 15 Foundation, dedicated to helping families of missing children and survivors of trafficking. Audrey became its first public advocate. Laura became its backbone. Helen, she donated the first $10,000 in her daughter Sally's name. They spoke on news programs, at vigils, before Congress. And for the first time in 27 years, people listened. No longer whispers, no longer rumors, but truth. The kind that takes everything from you and somehow still gives something back. Not peace, but purpose. At a candlelight vigil held exactly 1 year after Audrey's confession, she stood before a crowd of hundreds. She didn't speak from a script. She spoke from the place where pain meets resolve. I didn't just survive, she said. I remembered, and I came back, so no one would forget them again. Laura, standing in the front row, squeezed Helen's hand, and for the first time in decades, they both smiled. Not because they had moved on, but because together they had moved forward. 3 months later, the FBI reopened 6 other school-related cold cases, some over 30 years old, using evidence and methods inspired by Audrey's testimony. Across the country, old wounds stirred open, but so did old hope. Survivors began stepping forward, quietly at first, then louder. They cited Audrey by name. They said she made it okay to speak. They said she told our story before we had the words. The 15 Foundation grew faster than anyone expected. What started in a gymnasium with folded chairs and teary confessions became a national registry of missing minors and an outreach network for children rescued from trafficking. They had volunteers in every state, therapists, caseworkers, teachers, and behind all of it, always quietly present Laura Calloway. She never put her name on anything. She didn't need the credit. She had something more powerful than recognition. She had a mission. Once a week, she visited the school library, the same library where Rory once practiced reading aloud. She'd bring in flowers, rearrange the books, talk to the librarian. It wasn't grand. It was just her way of keeping Rory in the world. One afternoon, Audrey joined her there. They stood in the nonfiction aisle beside a bulletin board that now bore 15 photographs, faded, laminated, framed. Audrey pointed at one. "Do you think they would have liked me now?" she asked. Laura turned to her slowly. "I think they'd be proud of you." Audrey's eyes welled up. "I think about them every day," she whispered. "Not just the girls. The boys, too. We were just children." Laura nodded. "And you were brave, even then." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood surrounded by books, by names, by ghosts. But not alone. Then across the library, a small voice called out, "Miss Audrey." A girl, maybe 10 years old, curly hair, backpack slung over one arm, stood holding a folded paper. Audrey smiled. "Hey there, Ruby, what's up?" The girl held up the drawing stick figures beneath a rainbow. "This is us," she said. "You said to draw someone safe. I drew you." Audrey's voice caught. She knelt and took the picture. "I love it," she said. "And I'll keep it forever." Ruby smiled, gave her a hug, then skipped away toward the reading corner. Laura watched, quiet, then whispered, "You saved her." Audrey didn't reply. She didn't need to. The halls of that school once echoed with silence, with loss, with questions that no one dared answer. Now they echoed with laughter again, with learning, with light. And every year, on September 28th, the anniversary of the disappearance, the school held a remembrance ceremony. No uniforms, no speeches, just an hour of silence. And 15 candles, each one lit by a different student. At the 28th ceremony, a reporter asked Laura, "Do you ever wish you hadn't found out the truth?" Laura didn't hesitate. No, not for 1 second. Even with the pain it brought back. She looked out at the rows of candles, at the photos now restored, at the mural on the wall of bright colors and names. Then back at the reporter. "Yes," she said, "especially because of the pain. Because for the first time in 27 years, it's no longer mine alone." That night, as the candles burned low and the family stood hand in hand, a soft wind passed through the courtyard. Someone whispered, "Do you feel that?" Laura closed her eyes. "Yes," she said. And in the quiet, it almost felt like the children had finally come home. If this story moved you, don't let it disappear like those children once did. Like this video to help others see the truth. Comment below your words might comfort someone still searching. And subscribe to Tim Stories for more real-life stories of loss, truth, and justice found too late. Because sometimes decades pass before someone sees what was always there. Thank you for watching.